Hi there, and welcome to the Multiply You podcast, where we showcase top experts in their space and reveal all the secrets you need to know to multiply you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Austin Clark here, host of the Multiply You podcast. Have got a fantastic guest today that will teach us the ins and outs, if you will, of working in a family business. And I know all of us say that we're in a family business, but Noah is really in a family business. It's a fourth generation business that was started years and years ago by his grandfather-in-law. And so this will be a really interesting, fun conversation. They're also doing some incredible things as well in the pest space. I know that a lot of us have been hearing the catchphrases the last 2 decades, if you will, of going green and being more economical. I won't spoil it now, but Noah's doing some really interesting things in the Kansas City area as it relates to vehicles that they're putting into the field, services that they're offering. So really excited to be able to dig in with him. Before I do, this episode, as they all are, it's brought to you by my company, Moxie Pest Control. We're growing. We've been very fortunate to grow the last couple of years. We've done it a lot of the ways that you've done it, through either local service ads or pay-per-click or referrals or direct mailers or what have you. We've also found a really neat niche as it relates to acquisitions. And some of these sub $2 million or $1.5 million companies have looked to exit and know what the next chapter of their life looks like. They might want to golf more, work less, and just enjoy, kind of a later season of their life. So if you know anybody in any of the markets that we operate in that would be interested in having a conversation, I would love to have that with them. You can reach out to me directly on my cell phone. It's 480-254-9730, or you can email me directly at clark@moxiepestcontrol.com. Noah Besheer, he's the fourth generation president of Gunter Pest Lawn. His grandfather started the company in the 1950s. He joined the company just 2 or 3 years ago in 2020, after a 10-year career in marketing for larger companies, including the Four Seasons Hotel, Manifest Digital, and Famous Footwear, all brands that all of us have probably heard about. So Noah, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
Good, Austin. Yeah, thanks for having me. That was a really good intro, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, maybe we can start. I definitely want to talk about your business and the family business and kind of the ins and outs of that. But let's back up a little bit to, this isn't your first rodeo. I mean, you're not at the beginning of your career. We talked a little bit before we went live about, the Four Seasons and some of your experience there. What was some of that like working at the Four Seasons?
Yeah, working at Four Seasons was great because, that was kind of honestly, one of my first jobs. And so you don't know what you don't know. But what I was able to pick up on is the amazing kind of customer service culture that they have within the company. As I mentioned, it was kind of, I share my time between Four Seasons and then the casino property that kind of owned the building in St. Louis, Four Seasons Hotel. And it was interesting to see the difference in the quality of the interactions with team members from the casino property versus the Four Seasons property. The Four Seasons has great training programs in place that it's just, every guest that walks in there feels like they're at home. It's just kind of amazing how they're able to do that. And, honestly, it's helped me interact. And, as you grow your team and lead your team, in the pest control space, that's really important. I mean, the service honestly is just as important as whether you can get rid of someone's bugs or not. So, I was fortunate and didn't know it honestly at the time, like I said, because it just was normal or seemed natural. But some of those things that stick with you, down the road, it was really valuable to me.
And so before we went live, when you shared, you were hired by a group that owned the hotel, if you will, and the Four Seasons was the tenant of this hotel. And you said, the main difference was just because it was the same employees, that were working at the hotel and the Four Seasons, but the difference was training and systems and processes. Is it really as simple as that? I mean, were those employees just better trained? And in your opinion, that's what made the difference? I mean, did they have better incentive type programs? Did they have better health care, or did they go to college for 10 years to know how to provide the Four Seasons, level of service?
Sure. So, I mean, the property was downtown St. Louis. So, I mean, the potential employee base is the same, so it's folks that live around in the area, and the pay was the same, the benefits were the same. So really the only difference, in my opinion, was the leadership, of the Four Seasons team and the training processes that they had in place. It was part of their culture. Like if you walk by and there's a piece of trash, you pick it up. If someone says hello, you say hello, you ask them about their day. But it was just, it always felt genuine. It wasn't like something like, oh, now I got to be friendly to this person because a guest is around. It was just genuine. And I think when you go into that job and you see everyone else around you is like that, then it rubs off on you and you feel like you almost have to. So I do think that made the big difference.
I've stayed in one Four Seasons in my life for 2 or 3 days. The primary reason is because I don't have $2,500 a night,
Yeah.
to stay there. But it really for me was like a life-changing experience to see the level of service and just how everything was handled and taken care of. I mean, everything was an afterthought. You were having just such a good time, and it was so enjoyable and so relaxing. All of the conversations with employees, they felt conversational rather than canned, or hey, it seems like this person was trained to say that. They were there was a very human aspect of it, and it was amazing. So what would you say as we kind of get into the family business at Gunter? What are some of the things that you've taken from your previous career, not just at Four Seasons, but other places that you've taken into the pest company that you're now a big part of as the president?
Yeah, so I've worked for a few different companies, and like I said, Four Seasons is one, and so you can learn some things there. But with some of the other companies, like I worked at an ad agency that had a lot of food clients, and then also Famous Footwear. But the thing that stood out is leadership. That's the thing that's the most different. Like when you're working for big companies, if you have good leadership in place versus not as good leadership, it really impacts the culture. It really is what influences the culture of the whole company. And so I'm thankful that I had really good leaders along the way that, now I feel like that's influenced my leadership style as I have my own team. And that's really important, honestly, is if you have a good leader in place in a company, you're going to have a good company. And then in terms of other things that I brought with me as well, is marketing has been kind of my background. So my career started when social media started, and I kind of originally thought maybe be a copywriter at an ad agency, or a sports writer for a newspaper, things like that. But it kind of morphed that creativity and writing and communication into social media. And so that's kind of the piece, like the marketing piece, that when I started here, trying to quickly jump in, because I feel like our industry is still a little bit behind the times. Like there's, companies focus on Google AdWords and things like that, but actual creative in places like Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, I feel like there's still not a lot of saturation in the pest space for those type of platforms where you're communicating and interacting with customers. So that's something that, I brought with us, and just really trying to get our marketing cutting edge as I can.
And so let's talk about the family business. I mean, the company Gunter was founded back in the 1950s. The internet wasn't around.
Mm-hmm.
Computers were definitely not around. I mean, as far as like pieces of technology, like technological technology, not equipment, but computers and internet. And I mean, it just wasn't even. And so I'm sure the company has evolved like crazy, and it's probably evolved in as much in the last 2 years with you being on board as it maybe has in the last decade or 2 decades with you bringing some of that to the table. So the company was founded in the 1950s. I mean, what is it like? In business, you just hear it. Never go into business with family.
Yeah.
But you guys have really seemed to make that work. I mean, what do you attribute that to? And I mean, how have you guys done that?
Yeah. So honestly, I've been around the business my whole life. So my dad kind of ran the company my whole childhood, and I worked here part-time in the summers in high school and in college, so I was around it. I moved away to St. Louis, and I never thought I would join the company. Kind of just, I knew it was there, but I always told myself, no, I'm going to do my own thing. And I did, for a while. And then eventually you just kind of get burned out sometimes in the path that you're on with the corporate world. And around that time, my dad and my grandpa both kind of called a family meeting and said, we're kind of, looking to retire soon. So we need to figure out what we're going to do. Like, Noah, would you be interested? And I kind of really before that point hadn't thought about it at all. And then I'm like, you know what? I think that could be a really good opportunity. And so I feel very supported as I came in. My dad and my grandpa did things their own way, but at the same time, as soon as I came in, they were very open to change and very supportive of bringing us up to speed with our technology. And I will say for their ages, they're really good with technology. My grandpa is 94. He still comes in a few days a week, and he'll send text messages with emojis, and he emails, like he texts, he FaceTimes, there's not a lot of people in their 90s that work, let alone people that kind of can get by on the tech side. So there have been a lot of transitions though, in terms of going from paper checks to automating all of our payments and our accounting and QuickBooks, and just bringing us up to speed. But that's been fun. Honestly, what I like about working at a smaller company is when you make a decision, you can see the result from it, so that's nice. And then to answer your question about working with family, it's been good. I feel like my dad and I have pretty similar personalities, and he's very chill and kind of supportive and does not try to, honestly, he just is supportive. My grandpa, he's a little bit tougher, but at the same time, it's fun working with your grandpa. Not many people can say they actually work with their grandpa. So that's been, it's a good challenge. My sister works here too. Almost all of my cousins have worked here at some point or another. So it is a family business.
Well, and I'm glad you went into that a little bit. I mean, that is incredible that you got the opportunity to work with your grandfather, who's not like 60 or 70 years old, like you said, who's into his 90s and still coming in a couple of days a week and adapting with the company still, and FaceTiming and sending text messages, and that is inspiring. That is really neat. So there was a family meeting. Did that happen in 2019? And then you came on a little bit later in 2020? Is that about the timeline?
It was right in the beginning of COVID is when I started. Literally,
you're like, oh, great.
February of 2020. So yeah,
wow.
The family meeting was in 2019, and they were debating: do we sell the company? Do we kind of figure out that someone else? And my dad was like, well, if Noah wants it, like I think that he would be the best person. And I hadn't even considered that, and I just was like, well, if I could kind of make it work, transition remotely, and so it's been fun though. Honestly, it's been a lot smoother than you might expect based on the situation.
What would you say is the biggest change or two that you've pushed for and made with your grandfather's and father's, approval? Because as you said earlier, you're technically, so you're the president of the company. Your grandfather is still technically the CEO. Your father's the COO. They're not coming in as often as they used to. But there's still changes that you need to probably run by them. What would the biggest changes you would say you've made in the last couple of years?
Sure. So bringing our marketing up to speed, really creating a dedicated marketing budget, rather than kind of just like, oh, maybe we should run some TV this year, or maybe we should do some social ads or update our website. Like dedicating, a specific budget to marketing and figuring out the best places to market, based on our customer base. Another one is working at big companies. There's always goals in place. There's reviews. So there's much more like processes and organization, if you will. So that's been another thing, is setting up an org chart so everyone knows where they stand, setting up goals for the company at the beginning of the year, like revenue goals, but also goals that everyone sticks to, whether it's for Google reviews or our average drive time by appointment, things like that. But like giving us more focus, honestly, is what I've tried to spend most of my time on in the last couple of years.
What have the results been the last 2.5 years?
They've been good. So, yeah, 2021 and this year we've been up about 12%. We finished up about 12% last year. We're on pace for that about this year. That was the goal. So I mean, my goal was 10 to 12%. So I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? This year our costs have gone up a lot, so it's hard to maintain that same profit margin, but a lot of those costs are out of our control. Like we can't control the chemical costs, the gas costs. We've had to up our wages for our starting team members to get by. But in order to get to like our revenue goal, like those things had to happen. So hopefully that was a little bit of a one-time thing, that it won't continue at that same rate.
Yeah, I mean, if it does, it's really unsustainable. So hopefully we've all made those adjustments and don't have to do it again. First quarter of next year, sort of thing. So we talked a little bit before too, just about some of the green craze. I feel like has been going on for 2 decades or so. I talked last week with Greg Pettis, who's I didn't know before, I know now, who's kind of of nature side, who's kind of a big thought leader in the space, and some of his experience. But it seems like the last couple of years there's been an even more focus on green, and it actually being green, not just everyone saying that it's green when it's actually not, but it actually being green. You guys have taken it so far, and I want to know more about some of the service segments or other neat things that you guys are doing. But you guys have taken it so far that you've deployed some very unique vehicles into the field. Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like as society evolves, people are more conscious about what they're eating, the chemicals and the products in their homes, and pest control falls in line with that. I feel like the younger end of the consumers that are a little bit more educated on it, and our industry gets kind of a bad rap for that. So we try to be a little bit more proactive in that. So starting in 2020, we started adding Tesla Model 3s as our service vehicles for our pest control technicians. We can't do it for our lawn care, our services where we need trucks and things. Maybe the Cyber trucks
in the next couple of years, right?
Yeah, once they get going. Maybe. But, so I feel like that's kind of unique. You don't see Teslas as service vehicles for any business, at least in the middle of the country in Kansas City where we operate. And then our office and our garage are both solar powered. So there's covered in solar panels and basically offset our electric bill in both offices, both buildings. And so the Teslas we say the Teslas are solar powered because they're plugged in the charging stations in the solar powered office. So it is unique. I mean, we've tried to go paperless with our operating system, as I'm sure most companies have. Try to offer more as green services as we can. So I'm sure on Facebook groups and next door groups, you see kind of backlash on like, oh, mosquito services are killing all the pollinators. Well, so we've tried to offer an all natural option that doesn't, harm the pollinators, offer green termite treatments. We don't offer liquid treatments anymore. So, doing our part. And the reality is our full industry is not there yet, right? So you can't have a full product line of all natural products because they don't work at this point across the board. But we're trying to be open-minded and add as many green options as we can, as the industry kind of adapts and allows for it.
Have you guys, Noah, run into any issues servicing out of Teslas with either losing a charge because the field people are out there for long periods of time, or have there been any, or even outfitting them? I mean, I guess you just do that in the trunk, right? But have you had any issues using Teslas?
From time to time, yeah. So for our technicians that go pretty far out, like they might have to charge in the middle of the day, but there's a decent supercharger network in KC where kind of our technicians generally stay in the same territory so they know where they need to be and can kind of plan ahead. I would say it hasn't had much of an impact on us. But yeah, time to time, it's something at least you have to think about because you can't just go in and gas up and be out of there in 30 seconds. In terms of the vehicles, I mean, they've been cool, and it's a good conversation starter with customers. Like if you show up in that and they're like, what, why are you in a Tesla? And so it's overall like PR wise and, for our word of mouth, it's really helped us, I feel.
So what did Dad and Grandpa have to say about that decision? I mean, Tesla Model 3s are
Mhm.
normally cost a little bit more than your $25,000,
Yeah.
$30,000 service truck or van or whatever. What was their opinion?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because talking about the cost increase, when we got them, they were like just under $30,000, believe it or not. So in 2020,
Wow.
and they've kind of doubled in price over the last 2 years. So that's something that, we've had to battle. But my dad's the one that actually started the process. So the solar panels were put on the office in 2019. We redid our garage, excuse me, to have just a better flow for the vehicles in and out, add in all the charging stations. So he's the one that kind of started all that process, and we've tried to just expand on it. So, like I said, they are pretty open minded, and when it comes to opportunities, they definitely are for it. They're not set in their ways.
So you talked a little bit about marketing. I've got a question there, and I think a lot of people listening do. A lot of people that listen are owner operators and C-suite type level. But how do you determine? I mean, if you're $1 million company, how do you
Mhm.
determine what your marketing budget is? I've heard anywhere as low as a couple of a percent to 5 to 10 to 12%, which is
Yeah.
basically all of a company's margin normally. How do you determine what that marketing spend or marketing budget
Yeah,
is?
that's a good question. So yeah, I think like 5% is a good general range to start. And it really depends on how long you've been around, how strong your word of mouth is. Like a startup company is going to need a lot more ad budget than a company that's been around for 72 years like us, where a
Yeah.
lot of our customers just come from, well, my parents used you, my grandparents used you, now I'm buying a house, so I'm going to use you. That's honestly where a lot of our customers. So I think it depends on where you stand kind of with existing awareness. And I think, you have to kind of start somewhere. Like I said, we didn't really have an ad budget when I started, which was surprising. So kind of look back at what our spend was, and then you just try to increase it a little bit every year to get up to the level that you feel like it should be. I mean, that's been my strategy so far. And then, like I said, figuring out where the underpriced attention is. So, the cost of radio, the cost of TV and things like that have come down. So, do you look at those opportunities where everyone wants to be in streaming TV because that's where kind of all the eyeballs are now, but that's also the most costly place. So does it make sense? So I think it's about figuring out where your customers are, like who do you want to go after? Do you want to go after the younger segment that's just becoming homeowners? Do you want to go after the little bit older, wealthiest homeowners? And just picking your target, picking your places that you think will have the best impact, and then making sure you have a good story to tell and a good message around, what makes you stand out.
I love it. What do you see in the pest space or home service space, Noah, happening over the next decade or so? I mean, we've seen things um, progress so quickly and change so quickly the last 10 years with social media really exploding onto the scene, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, even TikTok now is being used as an advertising method, right?
Mhm.
And we've just recently gone through a pandemic that disrupted just about everything as it relates to supply chain and labor, different pieces that go into cost of goods sold. We're dealing with inflation right now, still as a country or so. But what are some of the challenges that you see, or things that you see in the horizon in the home service space over the next decade? That could be good or not so good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's, a little bit hard to predict because all those things that you just mentioned, if you would have said 5 years ago that all those would have happened, you would have said
Like,
you were
no
crazy.
way.
You know what I mean? So it's a little bit hard to predict, but I would say one thing that's going to stay the same is, the focus on service. I mean, honestly, like the quality of your team. So any service, whether it's pest, whether it's HVAC or anything where you're going into someone's home, like establishing that trust, the perception of this person is an expert and very knowledgeable, and this person really cares about me and is a genuinely nice person. Like that's, in my opinion, not going to change. But I feel like in terms of the treatment methods, I think focusing more on prevention, focusing on the outside of people's homes and businesses so that you don't always have to come in. I think people are maybe going to become a little bit more conscious about, like I said, the pesticides inside their home. They don't want bugs, but maybe they are going to be more conscious about what's being put down in their homes. So more focus on inspection, more focus on prevention, and not as much treating just to treat, if that makes sense. And I would say there are going to become more green and more natural products that are going to be available. And that's on the manufacturers, right? So that's kind of a little bit out of our control, but I think the industry, whether in the next few years or the next 10 years, will head in that direction. And I would say there's going to be a lot more consolidation. I think it's going to be a little bit harder for new companies to just kind of pop up. And it depends on the market, obviously, but like, the big companies are just kind of going to get bigger. And especially on the commercial side, that's a little bit where we struggle, to be honest, is, if it's a bank that's national, that used us for 20 years, but now they have a new purchasing person and they need to have one company do it for the whole country, right? So like we lose out on that, even though I feel like our quality might be a little bit better. So that's going to be tricky. That's going to be not as big of an impact on the residential side, but with commercial, that's tough. I don't know. How about you? Like, do you see anything else kind of changing that big in the next few years?
I think all of the same things that you said. I think technology will obviously continue to, that is such like a steep slope, that's happening. But I think the thing that you said that I agree the very most with is that, look, pest, HVAC, really anything that relates to service in a home or a business, I think we're still a long time away from drones doing our job, or a piece of technology that really disrupts what we do. And so at the end of the day, for hopefully at least the next 10 years and longer, you're still going to need people to operate those vehicles, to drive from home to home or business to business. You're still going to need them to operate the machinery or the equipment or the backpacks or the hand tanks or whatever, the bull dusters, whatever it is people are using. And I really do think that those are the companies that will come out on top. We've just kind of gone through a 10-year boom or so. I think that, I guess technically we're in a recession. It doesn't feel like that because there's been so much artificial money just pumped into the environment, and I don't mean to make light of no one really feeling it. Some people are definitely feeling it, but we're in a recession, but it kind of doesn't quite feel that way exactly. And so I think the companies that focus on the things that you mentioned, quality, being an expert, education, connecting with people, being genuine, people remember those things. People remember those exchanges. It doesn't matter if you're a 21-year-old, you're still going to remember the way someone made you feel and how they spoke to you or with you and treated you. And maybe that leads to a purchasing decision of your services in Kansas City a year from now, or 3 years from now, or whatever it is. And so, for me, I know that that's going to continue. It's been a focus the last decade. I think that at Moxie and Phoenix, we're going to double down on having that be a focus of forming genuine connections with people and have them know that, look, pest control is what we do. That's our business. That's our job, if you will. But what we're really, really about is people and quality and relationships. And we want your pest service to just be an absolute afterthought, kind of like at the Four Seasons. You don't want to, it's probably on a checklist or in a process somewhere. But yeah, when your guest goes into that room, it's probably important that the bed is made or that the trash is taken out. And so I think the Four Seasons, like your company and mine, perhaps they've spent some time thinking about that service and how they want people to feel when they walk in the room, or how we want clients to feel when we approach the door and knock on it. What do our uniforms look like? Are we frumpy? Are we frowning? Are we, what do we want to convey? And so anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but those are some of the things that I perhaps see happening and where it may be worth focusing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So as we kind of round this out, you've had a great career. You're right in the middle of it, or towards the beginning of it ish. What are some other things that you feel have prepared you, maybe as it relates to like education. I don't know if you listen to a lot of podcasts or read a lot of books, but what other, or perhaps have, mentors in the space or outside of the space? What are some of those things that you feel have helped to prepare you for your position as president of Gunter's right now?
Sure. Yeah. So honestly, I'm still new to the industry. Like I've only been in the industry full time for 2.5 years. And I mean, the average tenure of anyone at our company is more than 10 years. I mean, sometimes 40 or 50 years, literally, or, so I'm the least experienced person in terms of our industry. So I try to learn all that I can. I mean, I think going to conferences, I think, the academy is right up my alley. Like I'm very competitive. And I think the structure of that conference sets you up to where you can actually get to know more. It forces connection, and I think that really helps. Pest World, learning about new products and things like that. I'm thankful to be able to learn from everyone at, Gunter that already works here because they're literally experts and I'm not. But I think you can still lead without needing to be the subject matter expert in every single service, right? So, what I've learned along the way is how to interact with people, how to make your team feel appreciated, how to set goals, how to, create structure and processes that will help get you to where you want to be. So, those are the things that I feel like I've been able to learn and bring to the table is just leadership and organization. I mean, honestly, those are kind of some of the most important ones.
Yeah. Well, and in my opinion, I think that sometimes an outsider, if you will, that hasn't been brought up in it totally, you've got a fresh set of eyes, you've got a lot of great experience, you can look at things from a different angle. You're not emotionally attached to some things that have been going on for a decade or 2 decades and say, hey, why are we doing this? I know we've just always done it this way, but this is, there's 2 or 3 or 4 other ways that we might be able to do that. And then to be able to have all of that experience on your team that can say, well, this is why, Noah, we do it this way and not that way. We did it that way for a while, and this is the mess that we got ourselves into. But to have
that's a great point.
Office,
that's a great point, because once you see something so many times, whether it's here's the notification email we send to new customers or things like that, it's like, oh, whoa, like I think it would be helpful to add, this piece. So yeah, that's a very good point. So I think it's just you kind of got to ask questions. I'm definitely not afraid to act like I don't know what I'm talking about, because I know it and everyone else does, in some respects. But I think being able to honestly put yourself in the customer's shoes, that's something I really try to do all the time. Is if I was a customer and I was getting this message, or this was what someone left on the door, this was the text I was receiving, this was how the payment portal worked, would I like that? You know what I mean? And like, what could I do to make that experience better, make more sense? And so I think that's very important, as well as, really thinking about, if I was the customer, how could I make this a better experience?
Yeah. Well, Noah, thank you so much. The space is certainly better now that you've been in it the last couple of years. Gunter is doing some incredible things out there in Kansas City. Thank you for sharing some of your path, your story, some of the history of the company, neat things that you've done in marketing, and some of the things that you see on the horizon. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and for patching in. And until we do it again in a week, create a great day and create a great week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Austin. Good luck to you and Moxie.
Hey, thank you, Noah. Really, really appreciate it.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Multiply You podcast. You'll see us again soon when you subscribe for future episodes.